Morning, everyone. Got you, it's not morning.
Welcome to my time zone.
Who here is hungover? Oh, good, that makes it easier. Who here is not hungover but feels a little bit sick? Good news, this is likely to be a little bit on the dry side for various reasons. I wasn't able to do as much interesting analysis with the data that I had for this, but I'll run through my results, and if you want to go to sleep, I will not be offended. I will understand entirely, it's Sunday. So hello everyone, welcome to the State of Anime Fandom in the UK. So a little bit about me. I have been going to anime conventions in the UK for 20 years now. My first convention was in January 1997. What have you done to me, you people? Why do I keep coming back? At the moment I'm an MPhil candidate at Bath University, working in the field of fan studies, specialising in anime fandom. Other panels that I've run at conventions have included The Changing Face of British Anime Fandom, which was at Minamicon in 2012, and Fandom, Memes and Free Cake at AmiTV in 2015. Yes, there was free cake. It was not a lie. There is no cake at this one. Sadly, that is also not a lie. Soz. If anyone wants to watch either of those panels, Team Neko wonderfully filmed both of them, and they are both up on their YouTube channel. So by all means, go check them out. Fan studies, yes, it's a thing. It's a relatively new field of study, and I still encounter academics who work in cultural studies and anthropology who do not realise that it's a thing. I've also seen people online, particularly on Tumblr, joking about how future academics are going to be so bewildered by the madness that is memes and stupid stuff that we say to each other online. Hilariously, a lot of us are already documenting this, and many of us are in fact joining in on it. So, I fucking love memes. They're great. I mean, if you watch my panel about memes, it's a sort of bizarre and intriguing and brilliant way of communicating that we have with each other. There's an entire fan studies network that holds a conference every year. It's in June this year. It was in June last year. Probably will continue to be so. If anyone is interested in that, I don't know if there's anyone who is interested in fan studies as an academic pursuit, but you can check them out at fanstudies.org. It's mostly things like calls for papers, but they do have other resources and things up there as well. So why UK anime fandom particularly? As I say, I've been coming here for 20 years. This is my community. This is probably the most active community that I'm involved with. So much of my life from my teenage years has been involved in anime fandom in one way or another. I cosplay, I've been doing these panels here, I just come to the cons, I've gophered. I'm very actively involved in it. And starting actually from my bachelor's degree, I was writing about anime fans. It just kind of naturally progressed. There's been quite a lot written about Japanese otaku culture, and plenty has been written about US and Australian fandoms, but very little about UK fandom. And because I've been here for so much of it, and I've seen how things have changed, and it's been quite fascinating, and I thought it's worth documenting that and exploring it, because we're a fascinating community, really. We occupy a really interesting space because the UK community grew up in the shadow of both the American and the European fan scenes. And with the rise of the internet in particular, we've kind of ended up being in a position where we can see what they're doing, take on parts of how they operate, but at the same time mixing in our own kind of particularly British twist on things. So a major element of my research is making a historical record of the scene's development, because there is not a whole lot that's been formally written, so that's a big part of what I'm planning to do with my thesis. So 1 year ago, who was at Minami last year? You remember getting this in your compact? If anyone was at Kita and Amicon, you will have gotten one of these as well. Basically for the last year, I've been running a questionnaire to try and gauge some demographics and also some attitudes and modes of participation, various ways that the fan scene operates in the UK. And so this went in the compact to try and encourage people to sign up and answer things. To be honest, did anyone here actually fill it out? Oh, bless you, lovely people. All the rest of you, screw you.
There was a horrible con virus last year. Everybody got home and passed out for like 2 weeks, remember?
There were other
so many people had the flu though. I'm just throwing that out there. I don't remember what I did after last year. So
there were other cons where it was promoted. I didn't get a decent number of responses on it really until I sort of threw it open to social media, which I wanted to avoid doing for reasons that I'll go into. Facebook basically was the saviour of this because I actually got some responses. So the results, I got 256 responses in total, which is not great when you consider how big the fan scene is, but I was hoping that I would break 200, so I was glad to do that. Unfortunately, only 197 of those were actually completed. I don't know, some people reported that it was cancelling them out after the first page. Some people, I think, kind of started filling it out and then just walked away from it for whatever reason, but it meant that I had quite a few that were incomplete, and I did try and contact people who had consented to contact to ask them to finish. Not all of them did. I originally only promoted it through the compact flyers at Minamicon, but then opened up to Facebook to increase reach. This is because I'm more interested in what I would call active fandom, the bar I set for that was people who come to conventions, because coming to conventions is quite a lot of effort goes into it, even if you're not doing things like cosplaying or running panels or taking part in the masquerade. It's a significant time investment, a significant financial investment. It requires planning. It's something that if all you're doing is watching a bit of anime now and again on Netflix, I'm not sure you'd be so inclined to do. And it's the active fandom that I'm really interested in because they're the ones that keep things going. So I'll just sort of get with the boring things first. So demographics, some of the demographics I asked for were age, ethnicity, gender identity, sexual orientation, and level of education. So this was how it broke down by age group. The good thing was that even though there were a significant number of questionnaires that came back incomplete, because they had all at least completed the first page, and that's where all the demographics were, so I wanted to keep that data, which I was happy about because I didn't really want to throw any of it away. According to the results that I got, the vast majority, well not quite the vast majority, but the majority of respondents are aged 25 to 29, and then second greatest was 30 to 34, which kind of sounds about right to me. That feels like the where we are in terms of our ages. Would most people in the room feel that they fall into one of those two categories?
Yep.
Yep. Congratulations, you're not most people.
I've known that for a long time.
Don't ask us which one.
No, I won't ask which one.
I'm an old fart.
I included an under 18 category and didn't really expect to get any because cons in the UK are mostly over 18. I think Minami, is it still 16 plus?
It is, well, there are no people under 18 apparently, according to the chairman this time round.
Okay. But
Feel free to insert
Except for my son, who's 5 months old.
But the official line, the official line from Minami is still that it's 16 plus, isn't it, or 12 plus? Yeah. So Minami was really the only place I was going to get hits from under 18s from, apart from possibly Facebook. But I only actually got one person in the end who was under 18, and surprising number of people who were of the older bracket. But, gender identity, mostly male. That does and does not surprise me because, like I say, I've been going to cons for so long, and the thing I always like to tell people is that I remember back in the day when the con book from Minami used to come with a list of everyone who was registered, and I sat in the front foyer with some friends and we counted up how many women were registered and then counted up how many people named Chris were registered. There were more people called Chris. But since then, I have noticed that it is a much more evenly spread in terms of gender. And when I did the Changing Face of Anime Fandom, one of the things I attributed that to was Pokemon, which was a big entry point for a lot of people. I remember distinctly when the first Minami after Pokemon aired on TV in the UK, suddenly there were all these much younger people coming to Minami, and there were also a lot more girls. When you look at the numbers there, I mean, it is still sort of more male than female, but if you look at kind of the female and other genders as well, it's a little bit more 50-50. And 40.63% for females, that's not too bad either. So I asked about other gender identities because there is more gender variance that we're seeing in society. People are being a lot more open about their gender identity being different from the binary. I felt it was important to document that. Most people who identified as other said that they consider themselves to be genderqueer, and the other ones that I've included there are just sort of a mixture of things. It's an incredibly fluid thing, it's very interesting, and it's interesting to see people's kind of motivations for identifying differently from the traditional binary. So we had agender, androgynous, gender fluid, grey gender, imperigender, had to look that one up, and
Yeah, I haven't come across that one either.
imperigender is it's similar to grey gender, but it's one where you can like actively push yourself towards one gender identity or another. Whereas, I mean, with grey gender, that's feeling no strong affinity to one or the other. But it's not the same as agender because you feel that you do have a gender, you just don't feel that you strongly identify with any particular one.
Question.
Yep.
Do you think that you might have received strongly different results if you'd allowed, I don't remember if you did allow, I'm so sorry if you did, people to check a gender male or female as well as entering an other? Because you could easily be androgynous female and consider that to be an important part of your gender identity, or demi-gender or whatever.
With the other box, because it was an open field, so you could in fact put something. You could identify in there as being androgynous female.
Would you then have manually counted that towards the male-female? I'm just really interested in how that was counted.
If it was in the other field, I would have counted that as being a separate thing. And a similar thing comes up actually in the sexual orientation as well, which I think is the next one. Oh no, next one, do you identify as transgender? Because not everyone who identifies outside the gender binary is also transgender. Most people are not, which isn't terribly surprising. It was one of two questions that I made optional. You could decline, and this was one of them. The other one was about sexual orientation. But I did get a decent number of transgender people who filled out, and I like to get as clear an idea as possible, so I was really, really glad that there were a decent number of transgender people who filled it out as well. So bisexual orientation, again, most people straight. I'm surprised actually at how few gay and lesbian people there were, proportionally, because I would have thought there'd be a higher number than that. But then a lot of people identifying as bisexual or asexual instead. When I said about there being a distinction, with the gender identity, if you see in the other orientations, someone put down hetero-romantic bisexual, which I ummed and ahed over whether to consider that just as being part of bisexual, but I thought if they felt it important enough to note that they were hetero-romantic, I should respect that.
Did you have a question about romantic orientation, because it's a separate thing?
I didn't actually. In retrospect, I probably could have done and should have done, but yeah, needed to keep it a little bit simple.
What does the orange slice represent?
The orange slice, oh! No, that will be, actually, that will be, that's declined to answer, yes. Sorry. I haven't had very much sleep, so I missed some things, and I don't know why PowerPoint was fighting against me on this one, but sometimes it just didn't display all of the responses. But yes, no, that's declined to answer.
PowerPoint declined to answer also.
Yes. Screw you, PowerPoint. Mine is using useful. Ethnicity, overwhelmingly white. Again, does not surprise me, but at the same time it does surprise me that the slice of not white is relatively thin. I was also intrigued that we had one person who identified as Roma. I've never met someone who's Roma or Irish traveller outside of, because I'm from Ireland, I've met Irish travellers, but I've never actually met one in the fan scene. Hand up?
Yeah, I just wondering how the stats marry up to like the national stats for the whole country, for the national book.
I haven't actually done a comparison yet. It's something that I'll be doing when I break everything down more for the purposes of my thesis.
So there's another panel in the future then.
Yes, I'll come to this.
One from Minamicon 24.
I put in another option just in case there was something that people didn't feel really applied to them. The only one I got was someone who said that they were Latino, and I feel really silly for not including that. Levels of education. Most of us have degrees.
Yay!
Bachelor's degrees specifically. A lot of people seem to have stopped at A levels, though, which did surprise me. I don't know if I haven't had a chance to sort of cross-reference that and see if that's an age thing or if it's just that there are a lot of people who stop at that. But I kind of expected that most of us would have degrees, and a few people with higher or other postgraduate qualifications as well.
Sorry, Larry. Do you think that might be because? Do you think that might be slightly biased by people going, okay, you're doing this for degree reasons? I remember doing a degree. I'll help you, and that might have skewed it. The people willing to do the survey, people that went into higher education.
It's pretty likely. I mean, when I was filling, when I was trying to get people to fill it out through Facebook, a lot of people who were supporting me along the way were saying it's really hard to get postgraduate research done. Please do this, and I'm sure quite a lot of people who filled out were just like, oh god, I remember that.
Yeah.
But yeah. Again, it's a point I'll sort of come back to a bit later on.
So there are a lot of your fans who are like 19 or 20 who are halfway through uni probably would have said A-levels because they haven't got them.
Yeah, I was a little bit ambiguous in the phrasing, and I probably shouldn't have been. I did mean highest completed level, which is what I was saying about cross-referencing age, but I did have someone who wrote down in this sort of other qualifications box, I'm in the process of doing a degree, and they noted that they were at level 4, which is first year of a degree. So I put that in with the level 4 qualification because.
Roughly how many people did you get from convention-related responses versus Facebook responses?
I forgot to tally that. It was significantly more came through Facebook than through conventions.
60-40?
Don't make me commit to something.
Something rough.
Why are you doing this to me, Jonathan? Why? Why are you like this?
You don't have to commit to anything, I just want some idea. Like 90-10? I mean, it makes a difference.
I don't know, maybe like 60% came from Facebook.
Okay, that's all.
Alright?
Right,
I'm gonna kill him later, it's fine. So, in summary, most anime fans in the UK are straight, white, cisgender males, aged 25 to 29 and hold bachelor's degrees. Does that sound right?
Where are they?
Yeah, short of those on the stage.
Instinctively, to me, that does not sound right. Again, it's a thing that I will come back to later that basically amounts to questionnaires are really limiting in terms of getting a decent idea of your research pool.
I think you don't think that the majority of anime fans tick at least 2 of those boxes. The way stats works is it gives you that false impression.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen people do the kind of, the average person is such and such because over 50% are that, and that's not how averages work as far as I'm aware. It's more kind of, it's a sort of statistically you're most likely to. I saw a similar thing in the run-up to the EU referendum when someone was like, oh, well, the person that's most likely to vote to remain is a Northern Irish person who votes Green, and I was like, can we even vote Green in Northern Ireland?
That's a very good question.
I don't require an answer. So, entry points to anime. One of the questions I asked was, what was your first anime? How many people would struggle to answer that question? Show of hands.
Green Legend Ran.
Is that because you watched a lot of stuff when you were younger and you can't quite pinpoint it, or?
No.
But had no idea it was anime. And then there was a later on where I was watching stuff knowing it was anime, and that's where it started.
Yeah, there were a lot of people actually who responded because it was a free string. There were a lot of people who responded to this question by specifying. I watched this as a child and didn't know it was anime, and then when I got older, I knew what it was. With that one, I was a little bit belligerent with that one. I took, if you said I watched this when I was younger and I didn't know that it was anime, but then I watched such and such when I was older, I went with what you watched when you were younger because I figured that was, for me, I mean, my first anime that I watched knowing it was anime was Tokyo Babylon, but many, many years previously, I'd grown up watching Mysterious Cities of Gold in the 631. Hello, everyone my age.
Gatchaman on BBC Breakfast Time.
Sorry?
Gatchaman on BBC Breakfast Time.
Yeah, and my mum tells me I used to watch Battle of the Planets. I have no memory of watching Battle of the Planets, but she insists that I did. But you know, there was a lot of stuff that I watched as a child, which was anime. I did not know it was anime. It's the case for many people. But
Vicky the Viking, stuff like that.
Was Vicky the Viking anime?
Yes, it was. Yeah.
Ah, because I did used to watch that, but because it's got a different aesthetic. But,
I was that when I was 5, about 4
well,
decades
Last
ago.
One's not anime, but it's got the aesthetic. No, it's. I did have a VHS of Little Mermaid, which was definitely a Toei production. That one came out. That was released on VHS the same year as Disney's Little Mermaid, and obviously the point to kind of confuse people. So, but you know. Anyway, so I mean, I consider that the series Seasons of Gold and BBC 31 are my first anime series because those are the things which kind of latched me onto the aesthetic. So then, when I hit my teens, and I was reading a games magazine, and they had a little section of manga video reviews, and I just looked at the artwork and I went, oh, that reminds me of that cartoon I really liked when I was a child. Maybe I should look into this some more, and that's kind of how it all went downhill.
This is how we're going to see the right response.
So, what was the very first anime that most fans watched? Can anyone want to make a guess what that was?
Pokemon.
University Pokemon? Oh. Yeah, so I've just gone through this. So many people made the distinction between technically the first one I knew was anime. Many of the titles in the top 10 were things that we would have watched on TV as children. Some people listed 2 or 3 possibilities as being around at the same time. I counted all of those. Someone said Dungeons and Dragons, it's not anime. But yes, Pokemon was the number one, and followed by Sailor Moon, Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z. I counted as...
older people.
The biggest surprise for me on this was that Marine Boy made it into the top 10.
That's so old.
Because that's really old. The only people I've ever met who have said to me that Marine Boy was their first one are ones who have been around since before Animecons were a thing. And people who were at EasterCon when it was first proposed that there be an anime fanzine. So I was genuinely quite surprised to have that in the top 10. I think, what's the newest one on there? Is Death Note the newest one on there? Yeah. So everything else there is quite old. So
stunning results. I didn't believe that at all. That's crazy.
And that's from CITV before a certain time. I thought we were going to see some of the stuff from when I was a kid.
It's
and Moomin and stuff.
There were some people who did say Moomin, but
It's not anime.
I think there's a lot to say for people just forgetting that they watch stuff, because I cannot remember.
Yeah.
I know some stuff was repurposed for Western audiences. But
yeah, well, I mean, Robotech is on there, for example.
I don't know if I watched Battle of the Planets or not. I can't remember.
I haven't seen them at all.
Because you've got Guernsey TV. The internet cannot help you.
We stole your CITV.
Did you count G-Force with Battle of the Planet? Equal rating.
So, titles that just missed the top 10, things that I genuinely thought might be in there. Neon Genesis Evangelion, Tenchi Muyo, Bubblegum Crisis, Full Metal Alchemist, Guyver, there you are, the Moomins. Mysterious Seasons of Gold, Legend of the Four Kings, which surprised me.
Channel 4 showed it.
No, because I remember watching it on Channel 4 in the late license. Channel 4's late license was how I got into anime, because they showed Friday nights every week. They would show random manga video product, and
Can we ask when this was, or is that rude?
that was the mid-90s.
Yeah, it's you go over in.
But yeah, Legend of the Four Kings was the one that they kind of, because there were 12 episodes to it, which felt like a phenomenally long anime series at the time, and they just drew it out and out and out, and you were sort of having to look at the schedules religiously to find out when the next episode was on. Someone did actually list it as their favourite as well when I get onto favourites, which surprised me again, because firstly it wasn't actually all that good of an anime. It was one of those kind of, we've only got access to a little bit of the original text that we can adapt, because we only have so much money and so much, so many access to the rights, so it just kind of ended. Other ones, Vision of Escaflowne and Ulysses 31. Someone was waving a hand at the back.
Sorry, it was me. We were talking about Dungeons and Dragons not being anime. Technically it was, because it was outsourced to Toei Animation by Sunbow.
This is where it gets complicated,
Yeah.
because so much of the American animation industry has been supported by industry in Asia, Japan and Korea. So yeah, I was just having to be as strict as I could on it. To me, instinctively, Dungeons and Dragons is not anime, so I didn't.
And the whole co-production stuff, like Willy Fogg and that, I guess it goes a little
but
bit.
like
Pretty
Bizarre
sure.
director
But
Frosty the Snowman.
Wow, take a one or not.
But no one mentioned Willy Fogg in my thing, so.
Is the dividing line outsourced versus cooperative?
Sorry?
Like, is the dividing line outsourced versus co-op?
Yeah, what
Yeah,
is your criteria for it being an anime?
because Mysterious Cities of Gold and Ulysses 31 were both collaborative works, and I believe D'Artagnan was as well, and yes, I did include Moomin as well. Yeah, it is basically collaborative versus outsourced.
Like, nobody would describe The Simpsons as being East Asian.
No.
Even though it's
But a lot of the work is done in Asia, I believe.
Korea.
Okay, so most popular anime series. Now this one proper surprised me. Which titles are most popular with current fan scene? So respondents were asked to list up to 5 favourite anime series, with each title receiving a separate vote. So there were 985 series were named overall. Yeah. Counting that up was lots of fun, I can tell you. And I haven't even done the manga and the movies yet.
How many did you have to research to find out whether they were the same show?
Yeah, no, this is the thing. I did have to manually go through them all, correct the spellings, and just check for translated versus untranslated names, and have standardise it as much as I could. There were votes for Avatar: The Last Airbender and Ruby. I didn't include those because although they have clear anime influences, they're not actually anime. So I left those out. I'm really sorry if anyone voted for those and feels mortally offended, but soz. So the most popular titles might surprise you because they certainly surprised me. Here are 5 things which were voted for. Cowboy Bebop, Evangelion, Dragon Ball Z, Yuri on Ice, and Puella Magica. Puella Magica. That's the one, yes. So one of these was the number 1. Would anyone like to guess which one? Show of hands. Who thinks Cowboy Bebop?
My personal favourite, but not.
Who thinks Evangelion?
I hope so.
Dragon Ball Z?
What they just watched?
Yuri on Ice? And Madoka. Okay, so it looks like it was mostly Dragon Ball or Yuri on Ice. The answer was...
Yay! Oh, happy!
Now, here's the thing. I really actually did hope that it would be like, there'd be some decent, nice, big chunks that could then sort of, there'd be some nice, distinct favourites in there. It literally came down to single percentage points. Because nearly 1,000 titles overall spread across 256 people who completed it, 256 people who started it, 197 who finished it. I genuinely was surprised that Cowboy Bebop came in at number 1. I really would not have predicted that. I would have thought maybe Evangelion, because I do remember there was a forum I was on many years ago that did a kind of what's your favourite anime thread, and someone tallied it all up at the end, and Neon Genesis Evangelion was way out in front by absolutely miles.
Is that before the last 2 episodes dropped?
Yeah, Evangelion I'm pretty sure is the starting point for a lot of people. I just remember it being such a big deal in the fan scene at the time when it came out, so I was surprised that it wasn't higher on the list.
So
In theory, you said this was a few years ago. Do you think that the demographic has changed to an extent that some people put off by Yoshiki Sadamoto's very leggy, very thin, booby ladies more so than they were when they were asked a few years ago? Because I might have included it.
Yeah, no, the fan scene has changed quite a lot, and like I say, the demographics have shifted quite significantly over the years. This was the top 10. There were a lot of them that came in the same number of votes. Again, this list surprised me because we've got Cowboy Bebop, Ghost in the Shell standalone complex, Evangelion's there. Yeah. I've got Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood and Full Metal Alchemist as 2 separate things. This is the only one I did that for because they do feel like they're handled in 2 very different ways. And there was a significant enough difference between people who specifically said Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood versus people who said Full Metal Alchemist that I thought it would be better to keep them separate.
Very happy that maybe later.
Would have come in high.
Some people did just both, yes. But like I say, they both got their individual vote. And then there's the rest of the top 20. Attack on Titan. Steins Gate surprised me because I don't know that many Steins Gate fans. But the questionnaire tells me otherwise. Gurren Lagann I thought would be higher. Escaflowne I thought might be higher. Psycho-Pass I didn't think there was that much interest. I thought One Punch Man would definitely be higher. Lane! Where have all the Lane fans come from? Yuri on Ice, I mentioned Yuri on Ice. Despite seeming to be phenomenally popular over the last few months, and dear God it has been, it didn't get into the top 20 or 30 or 100. It ended up being placed really low down. It got 0.2% of the votes. That's 2 votes overall.
Not bloody bad though.
I loved it, but there's no way I'd call it my favourite anime ever.
There were people who voted for it though. I reckon that's probably because the questionnaire has been running for a full year and Yuri on Ice reached its peak in December? It's not had as long to get the traction that some of those older series have had. The Cowboy Bebop fandom has never gone away, the Evangelion fandom has never gone away, the Standalone Complex fandom has never gone away. Yuri on Ice is new. So in that regard it's a little bit unfair.
Do you think that might have been different if you posted on Tumblr as well as Facebook?
Terrible question.
That's where all the female anime fans are.
I know, I'm on Tumblr. That's why I didn't want to put it on there. But no, I mean, if I put it on Tumblr, the thing about putting it on Tumblr was I needed to try and keep things as controlled as possible. Not in any kind of horrible way. Tumblr is very America-centric, and I needed to keep it UK-centric as much as possible because if I ended up having lots of people who were American voting for stuff, it would have just confused things horribly, and I only have so much time and energy. Some other surprisingly low-placed series. One Piece got 0.91%, as did Pokemon. Free only came in at 0.61. Naruto got 0.41. Bleach 0.3. G Gundam 0.2 and Hetalia 0.1. These are all series I would have thought would have placed a little bit higher.
Hetalia wasn't really best anime ever style.
No, but there were plenty of people who liked it.
It just had the loudest fans at the time.
G-Gundam's got no UK release, so...
Selection.
Nonetheless, I mean, there are plenty of things that people vote for that don't have an official UK release yet, or have never had an official UK release.
Most things in your top 10 all have an UK release.
Yes, a lot of them were things that have been aired on the UK TV or otherwise made readily available. Yes?
I'm kind of surprised that in your top 20, Bubblegum Crisis didn't appear at all. That's old school.
Bubblegum Crisis, I think, was like just outside the top 20. In fact, I think it was literally like the next spot down after the top 20. Bubblegum Crisis was there. There were a few people who voted for Bubblegum Crisis, but obviously not enough to break the top 20.
The majority of the respondents were under 40.
Here are some series I didn't expect to see in the voted for at all, to be honest.
Ranma!
Yeah. I would have thought Ranma was a bit There are a few series there which are quite old, and even when they were sort of relatively in the public eye, were not as often seen. Kimagure Orange Road and Marmalade Boy I remember hearing about in my early days of anime fandom, but bugger to find. Polar Bear Cafe came up a couple of times and that just made me really happy because that's such a lovely anime and I just love that people loved it enough to vote for it. On a related note, there were a couple of votes for Cheese Sweet Home as well. And DN Angel, does anyone actually remember that? Apparently they
It came up in a conversation recently.
The two at the bottom, Catgirl Nuku Nuku and KO Century Beast Warriors. Who here has actually seen either of those abominations? It's an abomination, John, accept it. Right, for the benefit of people who don't understand what the significance of those are, they were two releases that were released by a British company and were specifically dubbed with regional English accents. They are quite an experience to watch. Chaos Century Beast Warriors in particular, because they left in random words of Japanese, and it's just really, really weird to hear someone with a very sort of broad northern accent going "Sugoi!"
Sandpit!
Don't forget the two scouts criminals.
So first anime conventions. I asked people what their first anime conventions were. MCM Comic Con came in at number 1. I didn't actually include that No, sorry, that was a different. This is a free thing. You could sort of state plus the year. I'm going to have to assess the year separately. I didn't have time to do it for this. A lot of people voted for MCM Comic Con. I didn't actually want to include MCM Comic Con because it feels like a very different beast to conventions like this. But the fact of the matter is, a lot of people are coming in through that. So, and obviously you can see in the figures, nearly 15% people starting at MCM Comic Cons. So it felt like it would be unfair to disregard them. Minamicon, next most popular, or the next main one that people start at. Amicon, Iacon. There were quite a few people who could not remember what their first convention was. I mean, for me, because I started at Shinenkai, and I've maintained for years that there is no con quite like your first con. But if you're starting out at an expo type show, something like LFCC or MCM, or one that's sort of more like a big kind of trading hall with some guests, as opposed to this sort of event, it possibly doesn't imprint on you quite as much.
Anime Day 92 Sheffield.
Yay! Yeah, there were a few people who put that down. I don't remember if I've got like the list of sort of other things that came up, but there were a few people. I was really annoyed because the problem with listing it on Facebook was I got some people who had never been to an anime convention at all, and they were just sort of going, "I've never been to one." Skewing my data. So most popular conventions. This was a checky list of which conventions have you attended. There was an other box. Minami, Amicon, Iacon, Kitacon, Okinawa, Alcon, Sunnycon, Wildacon or Tokunatsu, Hyper Japan, LAGC, and then the other box, which was again a free box. So yeah, looks like Amicon is the most popular one there. That's the one that most people have been to. It is the biggest, isn't it, in the UK of this type of convention?
It's
basically sort of summer convention is the big one.
Anime and gaming conventions. London Anime and Gaming.
Yeah, sorry, the font was really small because that was the only way I could get PowerPoint to actually display it. Yeah, so guess which other convention was most popular? The ones that...
Iacon.
Iacon's on there! This is the free box of other.
That'll be MCM then?
Yes, it was. 27.6% of people who checked other said that they'd been to MCM. I did lump all the MCMs together, mostly because there was no consistency among people saying that they'd been to London or to Telford or any specific one, so I kind of just had to go, well, it's all MCM events.
It's pretty much a homogenous mess.
Yeah. So fan engagements.
I would know.
One of the other things I asked about was activities that people engage in as a way of expressing their fandom. The one that comes up most consistent pretty much is cosplay. Everything's sort of pretty even across the board there.
I remember feeling bad I didn't do any of these anymore.
There are like everything except for cosplay. There were so many people just going, no, I never do that. I was just like, miserable people. I mean, I kind of get it because cosplay is, if you come to a convention, it's such a major part of coming to a con for a lot of people. I personally do find it that if I don't go to a convention with a cosplay, at least that I have previously, that I can wear again, I feel like I'm missing out on something. But yeah, I mean, I'm not quite sure why everything came in so low for things like fan fiction and fan art, because those are things that people can and do at home, just sort of for their own edification. And it's so easy to post your writing or your art online. So it seemed a bit strange to me that it came in so low for that. With AMVs and sort of other fan videos, I mean, because there's a lot of technical knowledge involved in those, so I mean, I'm not terribly surprised at there being quite a low engagement with that. And I was really vague about the producing other craft items because I didn't really know any better way of phrasing that, to be honest. Some people just sort of make their own things. It may be to sell in dealers' rooms, or it may be just for their own pleasure. But yeah, actually not too many. It wasn't too bad number of people who did actually engage in that.
Could it be that that thing like writing people felt that with cosplay, it's like you would say very often, because if you did it to every convention you went to, whereas for writing fan fiction of Virginity, it's like if we don't do it at least once a month, we don't consider it occasionally. We have quite higher numbers for the occasionally rather than fairly often.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah. I mean, I don't have time to write fan fiction, and I can't draw to save my life. So
I was wondering if maybe the numbers are skewed because people weren't sure how very often would be.
Yeah.
maybe. I mean, I did leave it kind of up to their own judgment on that. I had someone who kind of filled out. I sent them a text version of it so they could fill out some missing fields, and for cosplay they just put down often. And I sort of had to email them back and say, would you say it's very often or fairly often?
Because they'd say like very often would be every convention, but that could just be 2 or 3 times a year.
Yeah, I mean,
very often for fan fiction could be once a week, and I would write it like once a month. So.
Maybe. It's not something I'd looked into in that much detail, but I mean, because one of the things I did was to take contact email addresses for this and get consent for future contact. So what I want to do is sort of go back through what I've got, pull out some particularly interesting ones, and then email them back and get some more information from them about their particular modes of engagement. I asked a few questions about experience of Japan and Japanese things and Japanese language. Nearly 70% of us have never visited Japan.
Well, I think you should.
In this room, who here has been to Japan? Hands up.
You must go to Japan.
So because that looks a bit closer to what I would expect. It's not that difficult to get to Japan these days. There are lots of opportunities. When I first started going to cons, Japan was this sort of mystical land that was so difficult to get to, and anyone who'd been there was like some kind of like demigod. But there are so many other opportunities now. The people who have been to Japan mostly were going. It was things like I did a degree in Japanese, and there was a residential year. There's some people who'd gone out to teach things like JET and other sort of teaching English programs, and lots of people who just go on holiday because travel is a lot easier now, although it is getting a lot more expensive.
Did you ask a question about income level and what happens if you control that for people who can actually...
I didn't ask about income because I thought that was rude.
I just anecdotally just now noticed a really strong split with who said they've been to Japan in this room and age, and I think there's a really strong argument to be made that there are a lot of people who would have gone if they could have afforded a holiday since they were 18 and the economy collapsed.
It's a valid thing to suggest.
It's a really British thing too, I'd say that it's a really strong difference in
I say
pay
Donald
level.
Trump will sort everything out, so don't worry.
Quiet you! Yes, sir?
I was going to say, from having looked into it and knowing the number of people who've gone, the average trip, you're looking at somewhere between a K and a K and a half to go on that holiday.
Yeah.
That is $1,500 to go on holiday. That's a big holiday for a lot of people.
Yeah.
So the income, you can do it cheap, but they want to do the best experience and they're looking to get all the stuff. It is still a large amount of money to do it. So
again, this is one of these things that skews things a little bit because the economy shifts. The first time I went to Japan, my ticket cost me about £200.
Oh,
yeah.
That was 15, 16 odd years ago.
That's still a week's paid for me in 2017. That's still a week's paid for me before tax.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying it's a small amount of money, but compared to what you pay for flights now, it's.
Since we decided to leave Europe, the cost of going to Japan has gone up by what, 10 or so percent?
Yeah.
Just because of the exchange rate.
Yeah, no, these are valid factors, definitely.
If you do research,
Just still
stage as well.
10 minutes.
Yeah, I know.
Nobody wants to know.
£5 or £8 a night.
You can't get that.
Yes. If you do research, most people look at it. Yes, but most people are expected to look at it.
And I say, they're looking in the wrong way. Completely accept that doesn't mean I'm looking at it.
Moving to something a little bit less controversial. Japanese study. I counted Japanese studies and Japanese language as two separate things because it is entirely possible to study one without doing the other. Most people have done no, well, the largest chunk there is that people have done no study into either. That surprises me. Again, it seems like an awful lot of people at the very least have picked up a little smattering of Japanese, if only from watching untranslated anime, or anime with subtitles. It's obviously not a great level of fluency, but that's something else that I asked about. But it does surprise me that not as many people as I thought had engaged in active study. I asked about self-assessed Japanese fluency. I think people were actually quite honest with this because most people did concede very basic. And then some people agreed that they spoke no Japanese at all. Again, it surprises me a little bit that so many people said that they spoke no Japanese because it just... I was picking up little bits of Japanese from watching subtitled anime without even really thinking about it. Granted, I don't know that I would have said that I had any particular level of fluency with the little smattering I picked up, but I still don't think I would have said I spoke no Japanese at all.
I guess there could be that aspect of, do you consider very basic, I can actually talk to a Japanese person, or I know a couple of words that I can't string together.
So this is the problem of it being a sort of self-assessed kind of...
I don't know where I would assess myself on that. Like, I know some words, but I couldn't talk to anyone.
I've anecdotally found that in conjunction with certain learning, there's a degree to which the effort expended reading subtitles leads to people not picking up Japanese words in the way that many neurotypical people do.
That is an angle I hadn't considered, so thank you for bringing that up.
Dyslexia. That correlates with all dyslexics I've spoken to about watching subbed anime. You can still keep up, it won't go in the same way.
Yeah. Yes, thank you for bringing that up. It was something I hadn't considered. Bad me. Final note. Questionnaires are a great way to find out about people who like to fill in questionnaires. It's the main thing I took away from this because I just looked at the results and went, this doesn't look like the fan scene as I know it. People who think that Paris, Dublin and Seattle are in the UK, I know who you are. I genuinely got people who said, oh, my first UK anime convention was Minamicon. That's in Dublin. I had 2 people who said Paris Expo. It's in the name! People really like small local conventions. Because I included a list of list the other conventions that you've been to, lots of people listed little small Comic-Cons that were run in sports halls that were just local to them. Something that I need to do, I didn't get time to do it unfortunately, but something that I do need to do is to go through and assess kind of how many of those, what the bulk of that is compared to say MCMs. It's probably nothing compared to MCMs, but it's probably a significant number of people who are starting out or spending a lot of their time at small local conventions because they're convenient, they're small. MCM is quite intimidating, especially if I know quite a lot of people have various levels of social anxiety. I really hate the crowds at MCM. I find them very stressful. I know that you have my absolute sympathy, Joe. I'm so sorry. But yeah, it's one of those experiences which is horribly stressful for a lot of people. So I understand entirely the appeal of small anime cons that are just local and convenient for you. I discovered about a year ago that my hometown, my tiny little hometown in Northern Ireland, has its own comics fair now. And I was just like, oh! And then I'm like, where the fuck were you before I went to university? There will be a lot more interesting kind of statistics once I can actually do some full meta-analysis. Like I say, I didn't get time to do as much as I would have liked to. Shall I try to present that next year once I've done my dissertation and I know everything? Yay! Well, that's been locked in for the next year. We're just before 3 o'clock. I think that's a good point to wrap it up. Does anyone have any last points? As long as we don't have long discussions, because...
Just a super quick thing, you were talking about small local conventions, and just purely out of self-interest in this, did you find that anybody seemed to be naming the Tokyo Pop Recons by name?
Yes.
In their other?
Yes.
That's what I would
I had to look those up just to see what they were, because because I remember that Tokyo Pop did these kind of...
We're rural.
Sorry?
We're rural, so it was the closest thing we could get to for a long time.
It was like in a water stone.
Yeah.
Just sort of little things in bookshops.
And a little bit of cosplay, it was sweet.
They were the best things ever before you did anything else.
And then Tokyo Pop went massively bankrupt.
Yeah. Which is a terrible shame because that was a source of so much for a lot of people.
Yeah.
It started to become a shield.
Their CEO is a moron.
Be careful of the libel there.
I can't remember who it was a while ago. Was there any collection of how, like, whether people are entering on Netflix or like how they manage to access?
I didn't ask about that because certain modes of accessing anime are not actually legal, and I didn't want anyone to put anything down that might incriminate themselves.
I think it'd be interesting to see, like, especially with Netflix and Crunchyroll, like, just to see if your entry was either Netflix or
Netflix has just started to bring anime fans in.
Yeah, I mean, Netflix has a really good selection of anime on there.
It's very recent. They've started coming in through Netflix.
Chris?
I just wanted to know, are you if people are still interested and didn't before, is there still a chance to actually fill in these questionnaires?
I don't want to leave it open any longer because I have to submit my thesis by summer. And I haven't done any of the case studies or anything yet. I haven't properly gone through this data. I really don't want to add to it at this point, unfortunately. So if you missed your chance, soz! Any last questions at all or comments? Yes?
When you asked about people's first convention and other conventions they've been to, did you ask whether people have also been to other kinds of conventions? I'm not sure which was my first anime con because I'd already been to dozens of SF cons.
I didn't ask specifically about other types of conventions, but there were quite a few people who said, I'm not sure what counts. And there was a sort of unknown sort of option that I had included on there because there were quite a few people who didn't know, either because they had been to a fairly sort of standard expo type event, or they had been to lots of conventions which weren't explicitly anime but had anime content in them. I remember going to in my first MCM there was very little anime stuff and it's overrunning the place now. So yeah, I can't remember what year that expo was either. So.
Only bootleg anime stuff.
Yes, Granny.
Yes,
I'm doing what I can.
The whole of the left-hand side of Telford, not one real thing.
I know.
Yeah.
Do you have any experience or data on the sorts of people that are attending anime conventions? Not necessarily because they're interested in anime, but because their friends go and it's a social thing, or because they're interested in other aspects of geek culture?
I haven't taken that data because it starts making the water a bit murky. Like I said at the beginning, I'm interested in active fans, so people who are sort of are a fan of it and are actively engaging with it, which is.
That's why I was interested that you were setting your bar as people who attend.
People who attend anime conventions, but I mean, like, I don't know that I had anyone who sort of filled out the questionnaire and said, I've been to these conventions, but I'm not a fan of anime. And if anyone had, I might very well have just disregarded them because they're sort of outside my pool.
Did anyone put loser cons?
No one listed loser cons. Alright, we shall wrap it up there, I think, because Mel wants to do some sweeties.